Hello, everyone. This is Lisa Levinson and Judy Carmen, and we are here for our Vegan Spirituality online gathering that happens once a month. We're really excited that you could join us. So we have a very special treat today. We have a guest, Victoria Moran, who I'll let Judy give you more details about her later. Just wanted to let you know that we're all here with you today, and we're excited to be here. So for those of you who are new, I just want to do some introductions. My name's Lisa Levinson, and I am I organize vegan spirituality retreats and also meetups across the country. And I am the director of the Sustainable Activism Program for In Defense of Animals. And this program that you're listening to today is part of that. We're trying to offer emotional and spiritual resources for animal activists. So it's exciting for us to bring this resource to you. And this is our effort to bring people together, to have an opportunity to talk about what it means to be vegan and how to explore veganism as a spiritual practice. So thanks to everyone for joining on today. And I will be in charge of some of the logistics of the program. So if you'd like to, you can send me a note in the chat box if you're online, and let me know if any technical issues are going on, and I'll try to respond to you. And also, I'll give you instructions about how to comment when we have our Q&A a little bit later in the program. So thanks to everyone for joining us. And I'll let Judy, who's my co-host, go ahead and introduce herself, and then we'll introduce our special guest.
Hi, everyone. It's Judy Carmen. I am very happy to be here with Lisa and Victoria to help host this Vegan Spirituality conference call. And I am the author of Peace to All Beings, Veggie Soup for the Chicken Soul. And I also have a website at peacetoallbeings.com. And one of my goals before I met Lisa and In Defense of Animals was to help people spiritually with their veganism. And so this has been a great combination for me to meet them and work with them on this. And In Defense of Animals offers a lot of other things too, including a call-in line that people can use. Our next call will be October 8th on Thursday. It's a monthly call. And I wanted to give Lisa a chance to talk about the Vegan Spirituality Retreat that's coming up, because Victoria is going to be the featured speaker, right?
So our Vegan Spirituality Retreat, it's a wonderful opportunity to gather together and celebrate vegan life. And the day involves yoga and meditation. We have a vegan lunch that we share together. And we also have a special speaker every year. And this year, we're very honored to have Victoria Moran as our special guest. And we have a nature walk in the afternoon, and we also do an animal blessing and a community ritual so that we can gather together in support of compassion for all living beings. So it's a wonderful day, and I hope you can join us. I will put in the little chat bar the website or the way to register for that if you'd like. It's actually coming up very soon. It will be Saturday, September 19th in Philadelphia. So if you're in any of those areas, the tri-state on the East Coast, please join us. It's worth the drive, and it's so much fun. And of course, we have the pleasure of having Victoria Moran with us at the retreat.
Yeah, it'll be wonderful. So I encourage everybody that can to go. I have been to several of those wonderful retreats, and that is a day-long thing, whereas ours is just an hour long. So it's a great retreat for anyone who gets to go. Well, I want to introduce Victoria, our featured speaker tonight. We're so blessed to have her with us. She's extremely busy, so we really appreciate her taking the time. She has been a Main Street vegan for 31 years and is also an obesity survivor, maintaining a 60-plus pound weight loss for all this time. She's the best-selling author of 12 books, including Creating a Charmed Life, which is in 30 languages now around the world, and the plant-based weight loss classic, The Love Powered Diet, and the iconic Main Street Vegan. Her latest book is The Good Karma Diet, Eat Gently, Feel Amazing, Age in Slow Motion. Her college thesis became Compassion, the Ultimate Ethic, an Exploration of Veganism, which was originally published in '85, and it was the first work on vegan philosophy and practice to come from a major publisher. So Victoria is also an inspirational speaker, a corporate spokesperson, a certified holistic health counselor, graduate of the T. Colin Campbell Foundation program in plant-based nutrition, the host of the Main Street Vegan radio show podcast, and founder and director of Main Street Vegan Academy, training and certifying vegan lifestyle coaches. So you see what I mean. She's a very busy lady. There's more to read here. There's so much, but I want to share it with you because she's just so amazing, and it may help when you think of questions to ask. She was cited by Veg News among the top 10 contemporary vegetarian authors. She appeared twice on Oprah Winfrey and she's one of the celebrity coaches for PCRM's 21-Day Vegan Kickstart, which is a really awesome program. Her articles have appeared in many, many journals. Her work has been noted in USA Today, the Chicago Tribune, Washington Post, and many other popular magazines, which helps animals so much to get the word out to the mainstream. She was named Vegan of the Year in 2012, sharing that honor with Michael Greger, MD, and she speaks extensively for vegetarian vegan festivals and just basically all over the place. So she lives with her husband, who's a writer and musician, William Melton, in a LEED certified green condominium in New York City. They are co-writers of the feature film and pre-production Miss Liberty. Maybe she could tell us a little about that. And they have a rescue dog named Forbes. So we are truly honored and blessed to have such a powerful voice for animals. Victoria Moran, our guest tonight, and we are so grateful that you would join us. So, Victoria, one question to get started with maybe that I thought of. In the vegan spirituality movement, we're finding that many people are longing to bring their veganism together with their spirituality. What advice do you have for us as we look for ways to do that?
Well, I think if you're a spiritual person and you decide to be vegan, you can't help but bring it along. I think that in the old days, there was really more of that. At the wonderful Vegan Spirituality sponsored a festival that I spoke at earlier this summer in New Haven, Connecticut, Mark Bronstein was tabling there. Mark Bronstein, author of Radical Vegetarianism, and he was kind of trimming down his library some, and he gave me a couple of books, one of which was a copy of the very first book on vegetarianism that I had ever written. It's called Why Kill for Food, and it was published in 1956. So it was really a look at the whole vegetarian, vegan life from a point of view that predated most of us. And the very first line in that book is an explanation of its preface, and it says, the importance of having a philosophy of life and basically something to live for. And I don't think that's necessarily what you'd see in any of our wonderful books about vegetarianism, veganism these days, because it's seen as much more practical, I think, from the activist side about the animals. We know more about what goes on with them. We're very concerned not only about the fact that they are killed, but that they're treated terribly while they're alive. And we know about the health ramifications of what we eat, probably more than somebody writing back in the mid-50s. But I think what maybe we've lost some of is this idea that this thing that we're about is essentially a philosophy. It's a philosophy of compassion. It's a deeply abiding belief that for us to fulfill ourselves in whatever spiritual path we're on, or however we want to interpret that, or whatever we want to call it, it is incumbent upon us to be kind in every way and to every being, and knowing that some days we're not going to be so hot at that, maybe particularly with our fellow humans, who tend to be a little more difficult to get along with sometimes than our fellow animals. But it's a really beautiful marriage, veganism and spirituality, and obviously there are some spiritual traditions in which it is absolutely central. And I think reading about those and learning about them, even if they're not our own tradition, can really be a wonderful boost to what we get as vegan people who are also on a spiritual path. And I'll just finish this question, if I can, with a little story from Lynn Berry. Lynn Berry, of course, is the late historian of the vegan movement. And when he used to teach for Main Street Vegan Academy, and he was just so humble and wonderful. And he would tell the story of in the ahimsa-based religions, where the very first commandment is non-harming and non-killing, that if you were out in the woods and the hunter asked you which way the deer went, you could ignore the commandment to not lie and say the deer went that way because ahimsa was greater. And you could, if you got the chance, actually filch his bows or his arrow, because even though not stealing is one of the commandments, it's not as important as ahimsa. And even if you had the chance, if it would keep the hunter from going after the deer, you could ignore the prescription calling for sexual purity, and you could seduce the hunter, because ahimsa is the crowning jewel on the spiritual path.
Wow, that's very interesting. Yeah, I've never heard that one.
I hadn't either. That's great.
It sounds like it's really much in support of activism on behalf of the animals.
Well, I just
think
that
yeah.
When we come to realize, I think at the essence of any spiritual teaching, whether it's one of the world's major religions or a more personal kind of spiritual path, that there comes at some point this idea of connection or connectedness. And that's also the definition of the mystical vision or the mystical experience. And that's always what's called to me. I can remember writing to my Beatles fan club pen pal, back when I was a young teenager. And she said, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" And I said, "I want to be a mystic." And she was a very practical East Coast person. And she wrote back to me and said, "I think you should be a progressive lady theologian. At least you could go to school for that." But the fact is, I still when I grow up. And last night I was actually out at Candle Cafe West having a lovely dinner with a new vegan. One of the joys, I think, for any of us is when someone becomes vegan, and it really is because of us. It makes me feel, like somebody who had 14 kids and 106 grandchildren. It's like, they're all out there being cool in the world. But this woman came to the launch of my latest book, The Good Karma Diet. She's someone I have known for many years. And she came to that not because she had any interest in being vegan, but just because she wanted to be a supportive friend. But after I spoke about some of the issues, she stood up in the Q&A and said, "I've known you all these years, but I never got it. I have to be vegan now." And she's French and came from all that cuisine and all that butter. But anyway, last night, and when we were at the restaurant and talking, and I just said to her, "I crave the spiritual." And I think that's true for all of us who really have this sense.
So thanks for answering that, and also for relating it to a recent event, just an opportunity to have a meal with a friend who's making that transition.
Yeah, what a treat for any of us to be with someone like that, a new vegan, and help them along the way. And especially if they have a spiritual component to that, that really helps, I think. It helps make it stronger, don't you, Victoria?
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely.
A stronger commitment.
Well, yes, and especially because many, many people don't get support within their spiritual community for their veganism. Sometimes they get more support everywhere else than in their church or their synagogue or their ashram or wherever they go, where it's kind of poo-pooed at times. So I remember standing in a yoga center, and actually this was probably my own karma for the sin of pride, but there was a book there. It was a yoga journal anthology in which I had an essay about veganism, and I kind of wanted to brag and show this yoga teacher my essay, and she said, "Oh, well, isn't it good that now that we have humane meat, we don't have to be vegetarian anymore?" And I thought,
wow.
Okay, I shouldn't be being proud and trying to show my article to everybody, but also how sad is it that when this is really part of the essence of yoga, that it's been watered down to the point that someone could say, we don't have to be vegetarian anymore. And of course, what I wanted to say to her is, well, you don't have to be vegetarian at all, but if you want to be enlightened, it would really help. Hi, puppy.
I missed that last part. Did you hear it, Lisa?
Well, the very last part was hi, puppy, because I heard somebody bark.
Okay.
Yeah, it's important for us to really shine the light in every way. I mean, obviously, we need to be consistent and stick with being vegan. And I know in the early days that's kind of difficult and people don't quite understand and they don't know what to say in social situations. And there is a progression that goes on for most of us. But, once you really know that this is your path and this is what you do, I think it's easier to maintain that consistency than the other one, the one of really coming to understand that as many things as we want to fix, we don't really have power over other people other than just shining our light and seeing who's going to pick up on that.
Right. Yeah, that's so true. And there's so much humane washing going on and co-opting of our language. And so a lot of people have gone back to eating what they think is humanely raised and killed meat. But I think, again, the spiritual part really helps people understand because, to me, part of that spiritual mysticism that you referred to is that feeling that connection to animals themselves and being able to look at them in the eye and know that we're so connected and just soul sisters and brothers with them. So, Victoria, do you think a spiritual practice can help activists prevent burnout and heal the trauma of being an activist? Because there is trauma connected to exposing ourselves to this information over and over. And as we know, there's a lot of burnout, and some of these people that are going towards the happy meat end of things may be some of those burned out activists. And so we really want to help them. And a lot of them don't have a spiritual practice. Do you think it would help them?
Well, I think that something that massages the soul, for lack of a better phrase, is really important. I don't think everybody is going to want to call it spiritual practice. To some people that just seems odd and foreign, and it isn't the way they see the world. So for them, maybe it would just be having some other kind of interest along with animal activism, some sort of interest in art or sports or something like that. I'm told by other people my age that it's having grandchildren. I don't know. I have granddogs. They're pretty cool. But I do think that, well, first time I ever saw activist burnout, I was really young, and I was at the World Vegetarian Congress in Orono, Maine in 1975. And I had one of these almost Broadway show kinds of magical experiences in that the woman who was supposed to do the cruelty-free fashion show was detained in New York City and couldn't make it to Maine. So I got to do the fashion show, meaning put it all together, see it for 2,500 people. I've never spoken for anything like that number of people before. It was this huge responsibility. I was overjoyed. I just thought it was the coolest thing ever. But one of my jobs was to find the models. And a young woman came through who was so gorgeous. I said, my goodness, you look like you're a model in the real world. And she said, well, I was. But once I found out everything that goes on with animals, I got so sad, I had to quit work. And that really woke me up to the fact that we're all sensitive or we wouldn't be in this work at all. But some people are so sensitive that they need a little more padding and cushioning than other people. And I think the one great joy about being vegan is that this thing is saving animals. I mean, I love the statistics that we have now that since 2007, we're now killing 500 million fewer food animals in this country every year.
Wow, awesome.
And that's a lot. You know, people say, oh, but we're killing billions, and they're killing more in China and India than ever before. It's like, I know, but we're not in China and India. We can't do a whole lot about that other than I know Mercy for Animals is going in there, you know, we can support organizations and whatnot. But what we can do in our own lives is save some animals and be bright and sparkly and happy much of the time so that people will want what we have and they'll do what we do and maybe they'll become vegan and maybe they'll become partly vegan. And I always just think it's so terrible when somebody goes from vegan to partly vegan, but when somebody goes from omnivore to partly vegan, that's pretty wonderful. So I think that we can remember that even though maybe certain campaigns fail or some of these things that just seem like they ought to be no-brainers. Like I live in New York City, and we still have carriage horses on the streets of the city. It's so ridiculous. They've gotten rid of the carriage horses in New Delhi and Mumbai, but we still have them in New York City. And if I focus on something like that, I could just get so frustrated, you know. Why did we do all this? Because it's so ridiculous. And we get rid of the carriage horses and nobody would even have to eat differently. It's just like, why? Well, then that's really discouraging. But on the other hand, we're killing 500 million fewer animals annually. I mean, 500 million, that is half of a whopping.
Wow.
That is just unbelievable. And, you know, I'm not very numeric, so I read a book several years ago called Innumeracy for numeric illiterates. And they said that if you don't know the difference between a million and a billion, just understand that a million seconds goes by in 11 days. A billion seconds takes 32 years. So when we talk about half a billion animals, is it everybody? No. Is it enough? Not nearly. Is it a huge number? It absolutely is. And to focus on some of that good stuff, I think helps a lot. And then your question was about spiritual practice. Sure, positive attitude, meditation helps pretty much everything.
Yeah, and I like what you said about massaging the soul. If sometimes when we use the word spiritual, it turns people off, and because they relate it to church, where maybe they went and tried to convert people to veganism and were not having any luck at all, and the church is still serving barbecue and whatnot, and so they tend to relate that word spiritual to their experiences at church. And so what are some other words that you might use to, because we've struggled with this, Lisa and I. The word prayer is negative for some people, and even meditation, and of course God and various religious identities. So how do you deal with that when you're talking to people about spirituality or your own spirituality?
I have learned to worry a lot less about it because there is an epidemic of thin-skinnedness in our country. And I think that political correctness, which is fine up to a point, I mean, when it means that we're not insulting people, when we're not disrespecting others' beliefs and things like that, of course that's important and necessary. But I think we've gotten to the point where it's just frightening to use any word about anything because somebody is going to take offense. I spoke several years ago for the municipality of Overland Park, Kansas, which is a very prosperous suburb of Kansas City, Missouri. You can think of it, if you're in New York City, it would be kind of like Westchester County. So after I was booked and everything was all set, they sent me a list of words that I could use and that I could not use. I don't remember all of them, but I do remember that I could say fresh, but I couldn't say organic. And I could say vegetable, but I couldn't say vegetarian. And I could not say God because that would offend the non-religious, but I couldn't say something like higher power or universe with a capital U because that would offend the religious. So I literally went there to do a half-day training with a gag order. So I think that kind of illustrates some of the things. And what I do with any of this stuff and any of the spiritual lingo is a quick translation. And I happen to love people who have a spiritual life, whether the philosophy agrees with mine or not. My college degree is in comparative religions because I'm so fascinated by how everybody is trying to find meaning in life. So if I am at a Pentecostal prayer meeting and I hear things like praise the Lord and hallelujah and that's not what I would do in joy of feeling God because I didn't grow up in that culture and so it's not mine, but I can feel it and I can enjoy it and I can be uplifted by it. And just because I'm not going to go around saying praise the Lord doesn't mean that it doesn't do something for my soul when somebody else says it. And, you know, the same thing about this is kind of the words, they have to be known for what's behind them. And I think that's true of any kind of spirituality because when you lose that, you get into wars, you know, worse than arguments. I mean, people actually have wars about religions, you know, and we're looking at some of that going on now. So I think to just know that whatever you call it, I'm just going to trust that you know and I know that there is a great beneficence behind everything. And that you and I and all the other people, including those we disagree with, are here for some magnificent purpose that if we're really, really lucky, we may understand a tiny fraction of while we're here.
Wow, Victoria, that's beautifully said. It really is.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you mentioned that Overland Park. I live not far from there. And so that doesn't surprise me. But finding meaning in life, I think that resonates with just about everybody. And having a mystical experience could be described maybe as finding a sense of meaning in life. And having a lot of people, I think, have those kinds of experiences with their dogs and their cats. And many times that links them to what we're all talking about, reverence for all life.
Just today, I was out with my dog. Are you under the chair, Forbes? I don't know where he is. But anyway, and lovely woman, stopped and wanted to know what kind of dog he was and all that. We were talking a little bit, and she said, "Bless you for rescuing him. I do a lot of work with rescue, and you're a saint because you rescued your dog." And of course, I wanted to say, and I'm a vegan and blah, 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 I'm an animal activist. But I knew that that was not appropriate because she probably, I don't know what she eats, but, only 2.5% of us are vegan, so probably she wasn't. And I thought, what can I do to just stretch, maybe a little bit what she's thinking? And so I shared with her that my daughter, and just opened it a little bit. Yeah, the cats and dogs are so wonderful. And also the squirrels and bunnies and possums. And to just kind of, extend that circle, like Schweitzer said, just a little bit more. Oh gosh, dogs, such amazing creatures. Sometimes Forbes will look at me, and I really do think I'm looking into the face of God. And I know I can say that in this group without being carted off somewhere, and some other groups probably not. But there's just purity and innocence there. And I think even with us, when you take away all the stresses and all the concerns and all the complexes and all the emotions and the things that have built up over a lifetime, and you just kind of wipe those off, then we're all pristine and lovely and wonderful too. And with the dogs and cats, they don't have much of anything to wipe away.
Yeah, and if they do, they are really good at letting it go. And I think you've found that, I'm sure, with rescued animals, how forgiving they are to human beings. And it is that purity that you talk about that they have, that they carry. And I think that there's a real spiritual bond with people and their dogs and cats, and horses, even if they don't label it that way.
Yeah, it's pretty darn special. And I think sometimes it takes a certain, maybe maturity. I mean, I've lived with companion animals most of my life, but I feel that with my current dog, it's almost like when people say that they felt like they were better parents to the children that they had maybe in their late 30s than the ones that they had in the early 20s because they just needed to do some more growing up. And I feel like I needed to do some more growing up to really be able to love a non-human being the way that I love little Forbes. And my husband, of course, always teases me. He says, "That dog is so spoiled." And I say, "You know what, William? In terms of any human relationship that I have ever had, I have regrets. There are things that I said and things that I did with everybody who's ever been important to me that I wish I could redo or turn around. So I want with this dog to know that whichever one of us leaves this planet first, it will be with this great release of Forbes, I did my very best by you." And it's a good feeling.
That's wonderful. Lisa, there you are. You disappeared for a little bit. So you're still with us. Should we open up for questions at this point?
Yes. Let's go ahead and do that. I think that's a great idea. There may be some people on the line that have questions for Victoria. So I'm going to go ahead and change the format a little bit into a Q&A, which means that anyone who would like to, you can unmute yourself and speak up. That means you'll have the opportunity to ask a question. So one moment. Does anyone have a question for Victoria?
This is Marcia. I think I have one for everybody.
Great.
Hi,
Thank you, Marcia.
I was reading Dr. Tuttle's email for the 7th of September, and it was a prayer for caged animals, whether birds or farm animals. And he referenced Marjorie Spiegel's book, The Dreaded Comparison, that compares our treatment of animals to slavery.
Marcia, that's my prayer that I send out every week. I write that. Yeah, and it's kind of funny. I'll tell you real quick. but everyone thinks that's wills. And then one time I told the story about how my mother had passed away and related that to mother cows and so forth, and how they lose their children and whatnot. And everyone was emailing Will about how sorry they were that his mother had died, but it was my mother. And so since then, we have been saying, this is from Judy. So, but I'm glad you noticed it, and I think
prayer.
That's a great book.
But my question has to do, I also mentioned there's another book you probably are all familiar with by Charles Patterson called The Eternal Treblinka, which compares animal abuse and exploitation to the Holocaust. But I've noticed that a lot of people, including human social justice people, intersectionality movement, even Vine Sanctuary wrote a blog saying we shouldn't even say animal lives matter, that people are offended by comparing animal problems to human problems. So I'm wondering how you all feel about that, and if we need to work on getting some more common language specific to animals and their terrible issues.
Very good question. Victoria?
Well, I will jump in. I think that on some of these very sensitive areas, it depends on who you are. So I'm thinking, for example, of Alex Hershaft, who's a Holocaust survivor and who spoke at the museum in Pittsburgh comparing these issues. And he was able to do that. Is that a kitty? It would just seem, it would seem inappropriate. It just wouldn't be right. He could do it, and I think it's the same thing that a person of color can make the slavery comparison with more credence than a Caucasian person. So I think it's like anything else. If we want to make that comparison, then we're going to know that some people will say, yes, that's exactly it, that's exactly right, why doesn't the world see this? And other people will say, you terrible animal people, you hate humans, and you just don't have your wits about you. And so, I don't think people should be censored from making any comparison they want to make, but anytime we do anything that is apt to be controversial, it's going to be controversial and we shouldn't be surprised. So your question and your very thoughtful idea that we need to come up with some other wordings and some other ways to describe this that is unique to the animals, that's really interesting, and that deserves a lot of thought, which I will think about after we're not talking any longer.
Have you thought of any, Marcia? Any way?
I've been trying to think about it. I think the one that I can come up with the most, and it isn't exactly specific for this, but PETA's, animals are not ours. I mean, that is something that is so specific to that organization, and it covers all the bases. But I think maybe we need to find some shorter things to say, or something that we could make comparisons that are valid for us and that don't offend anyone else. And as Victoria said about the political correctness, it's really easy to get howls of outrage from people from just saying the wrong things. So I just wish we had more things that we just would be striking and attention getting, and that we could use without it would be our own.
We have a friend who's attending college right now, and she is an animal rights activist and has been for a long time, and was thinking she was going to a very progressive college and thought she would have no trouble putting together an animal rights group. But it's so progressive, she says, that a lot of the social justice people, the way she's explained it is that they feel like they have already set themselves apart, and that they just can't go there. They can't go and include animals in their circle. And so this is very interesting as this whole thing evolves and more people know what we're talking about, but they're putting up different defenses to it.
That's a really Right. And I think so many people are surprised. They'll say, but why isn't my Unitarian church, or why isn't my women's peace group, or why aren't these people opening up to this kind of thing? Well, it's almost as if they've opened up to some other stuff, and they've opened up as widely as they can open for now. And so that's why what I do Main Street Vegan, and why I wrote a book called Main Street Vegan, because back in the olden days, we really thought that we were going to just get all the really liberal people, and they were all going to become vegan, and they were all going to save the animals. But I remember thinking, even back then, you can't save all the animals with only half the people. And what I see is really interesting that's happening is that we're getting people involved in this movement from every walk of life, from every kind of political persuasion, from every sort of religion, and to just kind of put it out there and attract the people that we're going to attract. And I am just fascinated by, remember that old phrase that Jesse Jackson used to have about the Rainbow Coalition. I mean, we really have that in animal rights, because you can find people in this movement from every walk of life. And the other thing that I think is really wonderful about our movement is that we don't have to agree about everything. We don't have to all eat really healthy, and we don't have to all be voting for the same person in the next election, or whatever it is. There is room for lots of diversity for people who understand this oneness of life and the fact that every being really does matter.
Something to celebrate. Yeah.
Oh yeah, definitely. And I'll just mention that is something that we want to be aware of, that concept of intersectionality. And in a lot of ways, I think a few years back we were trying to be politically correct using those sorts of words. But I think here we as animal activists can also open our hearts to the other movements as well, and I think that's where we can create a sense of solidarity with everyone. So that's another benefit to being mindful of other people's concerns about adopting phrases. If we come up with our own and then share them with others, they may be welcoming of our phrases, since we're being respectful of the phrases that are for other particular movements as well. So I think we're creative enough. I think that our animal rights movement is creative and very positive, and we can come up with something. So maybe, Marcia, you might be able to come up with a key phrase, but also there are lots of animal rights organizations that are out there, doing Twitter and tagging and in defense of animals. We do that too. So I'm going to share that with our organization and see if they can come up with a good phrase.
That'd be good.
One that I just love.
One phrase I really like is animal liberation is human liberation. To connect the two, that we liberate ourselves when we find our connection to animals and seek to liberate them and human beings. It's all one thing because it's all connected to nonviolence. That's what I think connects all these movements, is nonviolence and the idea of oneness of life. And we're just asking to, let's look at all life, not just human life. But I do love that phrase. Animal liberation is human liberation.
One that I really love is from Mahavira, who is a saint of the Jain religion. And he said, to every creature, his own life is very dear. And I thought, that really sums it up. And who could argue that?
Right. I love that.
Yeah, me too. Those are beautiful phrases to start with. All we need to do now is put a hashtag after it, and then it will become an animal rights phrase. So thank you, Marcia, for your question. I'm wondering if anyone else has a question they'd like to ask. And if you do, you can unmute yourself, and again, that's using the *6, I think, on your phone, and that will allow you to speak to everyone.
Hi there.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi. Who's
Hey,
this?
this is Cheryl Travers.
Hi.
This has been so great. This has been so lovely. I'm so glad. This is my first time that I got on this call.
Oh,
a friend of mine told me about it, and yeah, it's so good, so good.
Oh.
And I really like. Oh my gosh, Victoria, you are so amazing, and I so got I mean, I'm actually shocked that someone would say that to you about the humane slaughter. That really hit me so hard, really, really hard, when that yoga teacher said that to you. I think that's the same thing that a lot of people are getting, and I don't know. I just kind of feel like I need to hear something else about that, because it's pretty immense.
Mhm. Yeah. And it is happening a lot too.
Yeah.
I mean, I used to work at farms I've been wanting to help animals in any way I could, and I won't go on about myself, but I've seen more than I've ever wanted to see in my life, and then I'm just, someone was telling me that's Whole Foods is the biggest supporter of that, and all of it. Anyway, whatever. I would love to hear what someone else has to say. I already know what I think. Thank you.
I think people want to be better. And so because we know how animals are treated, all these things that say cage-free and free range and humane, people say, well, great, let's do that. But the point is, and the real ideal behind vegetarian, we always spout all these famous vegetarians, and we say, well, we've got Pythagoras and Clement of Alexandria and Leonardo da Vinci, they're vegetarian. Well, great. And that was way before anybody had ever heard of factory farming. Not that animals have ever been treated phenomenally when used in human commerce, but certainly it wasn't this thing that everybody is fighting today. So many people have the idea, well, if we just don't do it this modern way with the incredible intensive confinement, then it's all okay, because they're not looking at the real underlying principle, which is thou shalt not kill. And right. The idea that the killing is incidental, and some people who like the idea of eating meat from these small family farms, and they'll say it's one bad day in a really great life. Well, that's ridiculous. I mean, this is someone who has been bred on purpose to be killed on purpose. And of course, the human-animal comparison doesn't work very well, because so many people are of the mindset that humans and animals, even though physiologically and anatomically there's so little difference, certainly among mammals, even mammals and birds and fish. You look at even the skeletal structure, you look at the organs in these bodies, and they're really just us, with slight variations. And yet, if you say, well, gosh, what if a human child were born, treated really, really well, and then killed at the age of 12 or 14 for food? And that's how I see it. I think that's how vegans and animal people would see it. People out in the world don't see it that way, unless there is an example that is human. And one that I have found has worked with some people who are aware of a practice that goes on in Kathmandu in Nepal. It's the idea where they take a little girl who is considered very beautiful and very perfect, and she is to be the living goddess. So they take her as a little toddler, maybe 3 years old, and she is never to have her feet touch the ground. She's to be carried everywhere. And she is lavished with gifts and fed all the best food and really revered until such time as she becomes imperfect, which means that she either has a fall or an injury or a cut, or when she begins to menstruate, and then she's no longer perfect and she's no longer the goddess, and so they just kick her out to be a regular person again. And that's a little bit like what happens to animals, except obviously that the animals are killed instead of just put out into the world. But interestingly enough, with the living goddess, there is a legend that any man who marries a living goddess will be cursed. So these poor young women are out there in the world with no means of support, and things are not good. So, we think about what humans can do to humans, and then we think about what is done to animals, and it sure makes having a spiritual life, a real spiritual life that isn't for our own ego, but that is really almost like the prayer of, what can I do today to divest myself of old beliefs that are just for me and that aren't here to help save others and mitigate suffering? Because to me, the whole reason that I'm vegan, the whole reason that I'm in this work is, of course, we want to be kind, but we also don't want to kill. That's the bottom line. It's the whole thing of, if you're going to kill me, don't torture me first, but, in the end, I'll be just as dead. So I think a lot of people just say, okay, well, if the animal isn't tortured, and then they don't want to do any more research to find out how accurate that is, it kind of assuages the guilt. So this is one thing that I love about our plant-based friends, that even though I don't like that phrase, in fact, it really bothers me because it seems like, you can say you're plant-based and you can still eat animal food, but on the other hand, they are bringing some people into living and eating in a kinder fashion so that they can open up to some of these other ideas.
Yeah, thank you.
It's interesting for me to I definitely get that, and I feel like it's the thing that's really missing for me. Not that you guys don't know this, but I sort of quote unquote around this humane slaughter is that this aspect that because I get people don't really think that they know that they're going to get killed. It's like they know that. They actually know that, and you really disqualify them, and you don't acknowledge them, that their level of intelligence, that they actually know that. They know everything that's going on, and that's the aspect around this quote-unquote, pocket or movement or crap about humane slaughter that, people are like, oh, it's in my backyard or whatever, but blah, 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 we know that. But this woman who you meet at the yoga studio, or me, and I meet someone and they told me that, and I just go, do you really think that they don't know that? You think that they don't live their lives on the hill? I live here in Tennessee. It's everywhere. I mean, it's just everywhere. And people are like, oh, yeah, I'm going to eat my neighbor's cow or whatever. I'm like, and they live their life, and you think that they are they're going to give their kid to you because of, and how come? It's they don't make that connection is the point that really bothers me.
Mm-hmm. Well, there seems to be a lot of thought among these folks, too, that there's something spiritual about killing animals. And the editor of Mother Earth News talks about that a lot. He claims to be a Buddhist, and the blood on his land has somehow made it more sacred and that sort of thing. So there is that kind of movement going on, too. And so I think one of the things I love about vegan spirituality is, whatever terms we use, we can help people see that we're talking about a deep soul connection with these animals, and that Victoria said, "Thou shalt not kill," applies to everybody.
Yeah, and in fact, you just mentioned about Buddhists. I know that the group Dharma Voices for Animals is within the Buddhist movement trying to educate other Buddhists about that, the first precept, which really essentially is "Thou shalt not kill." And one thing to address the previous question about the humane killing and all of that, I think I tend to think of it like these animals who are very well treated and maybe they're cared for and loved. What an incredible betrayal it must be to be sent then to this foreign place, and how terrifying when they experience the sights and smells and sounds. So to me, that's such an atrocity. It's really tragic and a trauma for them that lives in their bodies, and many people then consume that, and it's a hormonally affected in the products. But I often think that one of our great gifts is our empathy for all living beings, and to me, that idea of betrayal it's a real tragedy. I mean, all of the great love stories involve this real tragic betrayal that goes on, and that's what's happening with those animals who are very well treated and loved and then end up in the slaughterhouse.
That's so true. I saw that a day that I spent in a slaughterhouse, and at the end of the day, I met some used up dairy cows that were being brought to slaughter, and this one cow that I particularly bonded with absolutely knew what was going on. She was not going to walk up that ramp for nothing until the guy with the captive bolt gun whistled to her. And it was this quiet exchange that she looked at him like, "Are you kidding? Like, you're acting like you're my friend, but I hear the screams and I smell the blood and all my instincts are saying don't." But she went with trust instead. It was profound experiences of my life. And I think that one of the reasons why people are able to kill and then other people are willing to support that killing with their purchasing power, and I think most of us did. I certainly wasn't born vegan. But I think it's a little bit like when troops go to war and they're trained that these people on the other side aren't really people. They're less than. It's okay. I remember in the Vietnam era, it was, they're goons, or I don't know what they call them. They use some demeaning word to imply not quite human, so it's okay. And I think that that's how people see animals, and part of our job is to be here holding the banner for, no, you know what, it's not okay. Because there is not just a brotherhood of man or a brotherhood of humankind, not that we've even gotten that down yet, but there really has to be a brotherhood, a sisterhood, a universality-hood, I don't know what you call it, of life, because we're all expressions of the divine. And I just wanted to ask, I can't remember your name, I think you said it was Cheryl who was speaking before.
Yes.
When in Tennessee, and also are moving this. We are, praying that it's actually going to happen. But if things go well, and it really does happen, it's going to be shot in a town called Paris, Tennessee, which has a replica of the Eiffel Tower, and that's about all I know about it.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
And one of the undercover guys from who's now with Animal Legal Defense Fund, and who used to be with Mercy for Animals, and before that with PETA, TJ Tomas, and we were speaking at the same event, and we were talking, and I mentioned, our movie's going to be made in Tennessee, and he said, where? And I said, Paris, Tennessee, which I didn't think anybody on earth had ever heard of, and he said, I grew up there, and I was the high school football.
Oh my God.
Oh.
Wow. So I want to be let everybody know that the time is fleeting. It's so lovely to have Victoria, here's our guest, and I know we could chat all night.
Oh my
Our
God.
hour is just about up, so I think it might be good for us to do part of our closing. We usually do have a closing prayer or a thought for everyone to meet with. And if some folks are interested in staying on a little longer, you're welcome to. I just want to respect the time of the people on board here who need to leave. So really, with all my heart, I thank you, Victoria, for being part of this discussion today. I think it was very really interesting, and also deeply reflective. So thank you. And I'm looking so very forward to having you as our special guest speaker for the Vegan Spirituality Retreat, which is coming right up on Saturday, September 19th. And again, for folks who want to register for that, you can do that at idausa.org/retreats. So that's just a little promo. I'm trying to encourage you all to join us, because the reason that we do that is to celebrate together, and also to encourage you to check out Victoria's new book. This is fabulous, the Good Karma Diet. And I don't know if you want to take a moment or two to mention that before we close our group.
Oh, you're so kind. That was a title that I came up with several years ago and never used. And my publisher and agent wanted to follow up to Main Street Vegan. And I gave them all kinds of ideas that I thought would be really good. And they didn't like any of them. And my agent said, well, why don't you write the Good Karma Diet? And I said, I don't even remember what I was going to say. Or if anything, I said it all in Main Street Vegan, be vegan, get good karma. As I thought about it more, I thought, it's very interesting. When you're just looking at a good life for yourself, it really comes from two things. One is how you treat others, and that wonderful go around and come around kind of karmic law. And the other is how you treat yourself. So the Good Karma Diet is about kind food choices and also careful food choices, so that, you're doing a lot of the greens and the bright, beautiful colors and treating yourself so well that you feel really good, so you can go out and save more animals. And also just so you have this kind of vitality, so that you can keep doing this in the later decades. And also, just having people do a double take when they find out how old your driver's license says you are. So there are a lot of ideas and recipes in the Good Karma Diet for just living really well, but first and foremost, saving those animals.
Oh,
Wonderful.
thank you so much. Yeah. So Judy, do you have a closing prayer for us?
I do. This is a prayer from my book, Peace to All Beings, and it's a prayer for animals who are being transported in a truck to slaughter. And I know we've probably, all of us, been behind a truck like that or seen one at a gas station. And so I wrote this prayer for those animals and for us, because it's such a helpless feeling to see them. So this is the prayer. Beloved brothers and sisters, whenever we see you loaded into a truck, we witness your Holocaust before our eyes. We shudder at the mountainous cruelty inflicted upon you by human beings. Affirm with us and to the divine that love is more powerful than all this. And love is now teaching everyone that your life and all life is sacred. You are emissaries of the true light. Divine intelligence is with you now. Angels are with you. When you go into the slaughterhouse, march forward in peace and look into the eyes of your killers with divine love. Hold them in your gaze, that they might feel its mighty power coming through you, that they might be transformed in heart, soul, and mind, and know that you will soon be home with your Creator, free, at peace, where no more harm can come to you, only everlasting love. Know that we bear witness for you. Know that we are present for you. Our hearts and our prayers go with you forever and ever.
Thank you, Judy. That was a very moving prayer, and I think it related so much and so perfectly to our conversation today. And I'm very grateful to you for sharing it with us.
Thanks, Lisa. I'm glad I didn't cry while I was reading it. I almost did.
Well, that's okay. I cried for you. Oh, and I actually was thinking of the story, Victoria, that you shared about the whistling, and I will keep that gorgeous cow being in my thoughts and pray for her in the next few days, because I found that a very powerful example, and I think that it's just something that I believe we can offer prayer and love even after the experience is ended, just to let her know that someone cares, that we care. There's a tribe of people out here who do love and support her and want to help her heal her wounds of betrayal and with everlasting love.
Well, amen to that. I just think about the people on this call, and if we could somehow be cloned and multiplied and get to that critical mass. Oh my goodness, what a wonderful this would be. Back to Eden, as the old book said.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah. So thank you to everyone for participating in this call tonight. And if you haven't done so, what we like to do at the very end is ask everyone to unmute themselves, and we'll have a group goodbye together. And really, thank you so much, Victoria, for being our guest. It's truly an honor, and I so support everything that you're doing to help the animals and to help people who are helping the animals. And one last little bit of information: if anyone has a personal issue of any kind that they want to have some caring, compassionate support for, one other project that In Defense of Animals has is this helpline. And you can call the helpline, probably just Google Animal Activist Helpline, or you can go to idausa.org/helpline. So there is support at any moment if you need it. So again, thanks to everyone for participating tonight, and have a wonderful evening. If you can, unmute yourself, and we'll do a round of goodbyes. Anyone else out there?
Goodbye.
Yeah.
Good night,
Bye.
everyone.
Thank you.
Good night.
Goodbye.
Oh, thank you. Thank you
Good
for
night.
joining us. Have a wonderful evening, and we'll
Goodbye.
see you
Thank
next
you.
time.
Bye.
All right.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank